Thank you very much. So yes, I'm called Head of Surveys at DWP, which sounds rather grand, but in practice it means that my team is responsible for the Family Resources Survey, a number of outputs that come off the back of that, such as households below average income. I'm not responsible for all surveys in the department. I want to make that clear right at the start. But otherwise, it's really good to be hearing the discussion we've already had this morning, and get that sort of feedback on our publication and our report from the user community here. So it's really good to get those sort of points, and there's certainly a number of things that we'll be trying to take away in the team. Anyway, some of the things I think points that we sort of recognise already, but again, it's always good to get that wider feedback from the group of users here. So you'll also probably be pleased to know that I'm not actually going to show any results of the survey and the HBAI today. I think you saw 3 or 4 of those slides this morning. You don't want me to repeat that. So what I thought instead was that I'd try and tell you a bit more in broad terms about how we collect and produce our data and analysis, so that you as users maybe can understand a bit more about where the results are coming from, the different stages involved in their production, and then what that means in terms of the quality of the data that we're able to put out, that we know that all the users rely on in terms of, so that users have confidence in the data that you're going to be then using for your own purposes as well. And also, I think when Glenn does his talk in a couple of minutes as well, he's going to, I think, talk a couple of, or mention a couple of points where the family resources data that ONS is using. And so again, if I've said a bit about the survey, that will hopefully sort of link up and put in the context for some of the points that Glenn's going to make as well. So what is the Family Resources Survey? Well, it's in short then, it's an annual household survey, and it collects detailed information on income and circumstances of individuals living in private households. In particular, we try and collect detailed information on all income streams. So that includes benefits, earnings, pensions, investments, and other sorts of income as well. We also collect information on other topics about household and individual characteristics. For example, issues around caring, disability, pension, participation, and so on. So one of the key things to note, it is not just an income survey to start with. It does have that wider remit as well. It is large scale in terms of 20,000 households across the UK, fieldwork taking place across the whole financial year. That means it is one of the biggest surveys in government, which is obviously a benefit to the user community. And it's got a long history behind it as well. The survey is sponsored by DWP, and it was designed to meet DWP needs, but it also then collects that wide information that will be of interest to the other wider community of researchers and analysts from a range of disciplines. We've made a change in 2012 when the FRS took on responsibility for cross-sectional EU silk. That was obviously a major change for the team to take on that responsibility in the last few years. And what I should also highlight is that this project would not be possible without the consortium that actually undertakes the survey for us. And that's the people in the consortium are Office for National Statistics, National Centre, and then NISRA in Northern Ireland, and obviously they're a key part of us being able to deliver this project. So, if you're going to have some quality statistics, obviously you need to start with the questionnaire. So that's the key starting point for us, and given all the changes that are happening in terms of the policy world, we need to review that content annually to make sure it reflects the latest policy changes, introduces any new harmonised questions across the GSS, and other changes that are going to be required. However, we do also have to bear in mind, though, that balance between respondent burden in terms of what we're asking people and the costs of the project as well. Obviously, it would be nice if we could have an exceedingly long interview and ask all sorts of questions to respondents, but I think they would probably soon turn off their interest in the survey, which wouldn't do any of us any good. So there is a balance to strike there. We have to bear that in mind. Specialist software is obviously used to collect the information during the interview. That means we're able to build in certain checks to the questionnaire, for example, as the interviewers are going along to make sure the right data is being collected as best we can. We try and ask people to refer to pay slips or benefit letters to try and check out their amounts or that they're entitled to or what they're receiving. So again, in terms of collecting the information, the value of the very experienced field force is really important there in terms of being able to achieve effective interviews. Then, when the data has been collected, it goes back to the Office for National Statistics and then comes back to my team in DWP, and then a lot of the data processing goes on, which means, again, we're able to deliver a quality data set. So again, in broad terms, collecting income and then making income variables is actually one of the most complex areas of statistical work across government from that point of view. So this is not always a straightforward process, and we do obviously take it very seriously what we're trying to do here. So there's various processes that take place in terms of, for example, benefit editing to try and make sure we've got the best benefit information in there that we can do. We also then have other item non-response imputation using different approaches for different types of variables. We do various other credibility checks, outlier checks, other validation checks. Our internal user testing is a key part of the process as well. That gives our wider user community internally an opportunity to take a look at the data set, identify any issues, and then it gives us a chance to try and resolve those before the data set is actually finalised. And then once we've done all of those checks, also then we're responsible for doing the grossing of the data as well, which means that it's obviously then able to reflect the wider population numbers from that point of view. And in terms of grossing, maybe it's just worth saying as well that last year we undertook the once in a decade regrossing exercise so that we revised and updated data sets to reflect the updated population totals following the publication at the 2011 census. So that was 10 data sets that we basically recreated, rechecked to make sure that all of that, that time series, which is important to so many users, was then updated in a robust way. And obviously we're then building on that again for this coming year. Obviously, then using the FRS, because it is a survey, obviously there are various nuances around using a survey that we have to bear in mind when we're then looking at the data, analysing it and interpreting it. So, for example, we've obviously got sampling error in there, and this will obviously vary depending on the level of disaggregation to which results are being presented. Non-response error, trying to correct for that, for differential non-response, we obviously use weighting, as I've just alluded to a minute ago, in terms of our population totals. Survey coverage, a reminder that the Family Resources Survey covers private households. For some analyses, if you're interested in people who might be in, for example, care homes or other institutions, obviously they are not included in the survey. So again, in terms of interpreting the results, that's an issue for some users potentially to bear in mind. The survey design, now I've said it's a large survey. The approach that we use a clustered sample, and that's designed to produce robust estimates at the former government office region level. So that means the FRS is therefore not suitable on its own for analysis below regional level. So, but again, that's something we just have to bear in mind given the size and the design of the survey. And as I say, FRS is a relatively large sample for a household survey, but obviously for some specific sort of niche areas or small group analysis, you might obviously have to combine several years of data in order to get some more robust results. So who are some of the users of the FRS? And I think we can see a number of them highlighted here. The FRS is then, the data set is then the basis for a number of national statistics publications. It's used by DWP analysts to inform policy development costings. It's used by other government departments and in their own policy work, used by ONS, as you'll hear in a minute. Obviously used by some of yourselves here, people who are using it outside of government as well. We've highlighted, obviously we publish a lot of tables on gov.uk. I think that's been mentioned earlier today. There's a lot of detailed tables we're putting out there, hopefully, so that they're useful for users. Data is also feeding into Eurostat now. And again, it's just a reminder that the whole range of variables in the FRS are important for these different teams. It's not just the income data in isolation. But if you are interested in income information, obviously then households below average income is the place to be going. And that's obviously one of the most high-profile outputs that is based on the FRS. That specifically focuses on income analysis, and it's a pretty comprehensive publication with, again, a long history. So it includes data on the whole income distribution, information on income equality, such as Gini measurements. We look at different population groups, for example, working age people, children, pensioners, households with a person with a disability. Different measures of poverty, we'll see some of that in a minute, and various different subgroups of analysis in terms of characteristics, again, some of which have been highlighted in the earlier presentations, but we've obviously got things like age, employment status, region, ethnicity, qualification level, and some other characteristics as well. So that means overall, it obviously can answer many different questions relating to poverty and incomes. We've mentioned already the UK doesn't have a single official definition of poverty, but the three key cross-sectional measures that we include in the HBAI are relative low income, absolute income, and then material deprivation, again, as you've heard earlier. And so overall then, almost, how do we get to those reliable income stats in HBAI? So there's a whole number of factors that support the analysis here. It's obviously based on a large-scale household survey. That collects detailed income components. We include adjustments for those with the high incomes that we can do. And one of the very important elements that we've introduced as well is in terms of this independent checking of the HBI data set. We learned lessons from a few years ago when we had to republish the data set following the identification of an error. We introduced this external quality assurance as an additional step during our quality assurance period. We don't want to be in the position of withdrawing the data set again in the future. We know users need to have confidence in the statistics so they can use them for their own purposes. And so that's why that additional quality checking work is really important. And I think to some extent, obviously, I've heard some of the messages around timeliness of the data being mentioned in some of the presentations earlier in the day. Overall, we have to try and strike a balance between the quality of the data and the timeliness of the data. And to some extent, as I say, we've learned these lessons when the quality was not right, and that's why we are focusing on making sure the quality is right now. And then, as we've said, to support users, we've sought to make improvements to the publication over the last 3 years or so. We've made changes to the commentary, we've made changes to the tables that are available, we've worked closely with the National Statisticians Good Practice team. Again, it's really positive for us to hear the sort of feedback from people who have been trying to use the publication. And again, I hope you can appreciate that sometimes, almost because there is so much information there, we want to try and put out a lot of information, but then appreciate the flip side of that is maybe you can't always find the table you want. So appreciate it is a balancing act for us. And again, we appreciate any sort of feedback about that. If there's any other ideas about maybe additional breakdowns that you think might be helpful, it might be something we can try and consider for future reports, for example. We're really keen to hear your feedback and see what that means for us in terms of future developments and future ideas. Thank you very much.